All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Gloria Luong. I'm an associate professor in human development and family studies. And it's my honor to introduce our Healthy Aging Speaker Series presenter today, Dr. Karen Fingerman. This is a special presentation co-hosted by the Department of Human Development and Family Studies and the Columbine Health System Center for Healthy Aging. Dr. Fingerman is a distinguished professor from the University of Texas at Austin who wears numerous hats, including as the Director of Research for the Center on Aging and Population Sciences, the founding director of the Texas Aging and Longevity Center, and the Sonia Wolf Regents Administrative Professor of Human Ecology. She has far too many publications, honors, and accolades to list, but I will try to provide some highlights. She has received grant funding from the National Institute on Aging and the MacArthur Networks, among others, to support her innovative research program on social relationships and health across adulthood. These projects include examining problems and social support exchanges among family units, including parents and adult children. And more recently, she's been the PI, the principal investigator, of the Daily Exchanges and Wellbeing Study, which she'll tell us more about today. She's published over 64 papers in just the last 5 years alone. I had to stop counting. And she's been recognized for her work with countless awards, including most recently the Baltus Award for Distinguished Research Achievement in Psychology and Aging from the American Psychological Association in 2022. She's going to give her award address this year at the APA conference in Washington, D.C. She's also attained fellow status in APA, the Association for Psychological Science, and the Gerontological Society of America, GSA. I've been lucky to know Dr. Fingerman since I was just a wee little young grad student, and I remember feeling very intimidated by renowned scholars such as herself when I was a grad student. But one of my favorite things about Dr. Fingerman is that despite all of these impressive achievements, she is down to earth, approachable, and generous with her support and time. And this is reflected by her receipt of the Distinguished Mentorship in Gerontology Award from the Behavioral and Social Sciences section of the GSA, and several teaching and leadership awards from UT Austin. We are truly fortunate to have such a generative and inspirational scholar with us today. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Karen Fingerman, who will share her work on social ties and the lived experience, a daily assessment.
Thank you so much for that introduction. And I should say the credit goes to collaborators and students, and Gloria has been a huge part of that over the years. So I'm very grateful to everyone who's helped me in my career, and then I just steal the credit. So, and I'm really grateful that you all came today. I know you have other things in the summer, so I hope I'll be able to give you some information or something that at least, gives you a little tidbit that made it worthwhile, but I really appreciate your being here. I'm going to talk a little bit about social ties in late life. So let's take a look at what we know. Okay, so older adults who have strong social ties live longer. They live longer in better health, which is what we all want and what your center emphasizes. They're happier, they're cognitively functioning. There's just all kinds of goodies if you have strong social ties. Now, what's interesting, let me show you, this is probably one of the most used graphs. It's from a meta-analysis by Jolene Hout-Lanstead. And what she did is she combined all these studies to look at survival and what are the factors that contribute to survival. If you take a look at this, social relationships up here in the red box are the strongest predictors of survival, more so than some of the obvious culprits: smoking, alcohol, vaccination, BMI, social relationships. And this is one of the most intriguing things, I think, in the literature on aging and survival. It's easy to say, okay, obesity, we got some inflammation, we got this, we got heart, smoking's damaging your lungs, we know, but relationships, what the heck is going on there? And this has been a huge area of research, both, in the literature. It's just a big area. So let's take a look at a couple of the theories that get at this. Or a couple of the mechanisms. One of them is attachment, the idea that you need affection and support as a human being. And the other is the idea of social integration, which is engagement in many roles and access to resources. Now, this area and the emotional components and the supportive components have received more research attention. This area less so in late life. It's It's in the epidemiological literature, it's in sociology, but it's not as well tested in the gerontological literature in aging, where clearly it overlaps. Social integration makes you live longer. Yeah, most of the deaths occur in old age. It's got to be about aging in some way too. And that's where most of my talk is going to take place. So close ties matter. There's no doubt about that. The dominant paradigm in the field of psychology is socio-emotional selectivity theory. There have been over 50,000 citations of this theory supporting it. And the idea here is that when you have a foreshortened time perspective, that's when you begin to constrict your network to the people that you find the most meaningful and the most rewarding emotionally. And I'm going to show you that this is partly how we've been measuring things, but it's also true. When you get 50,000 citations, you want to have an undergraduate do an honors thesis, you want them to get findings, give them this theory, everybody gets something with this. But so it's definitely a great theory. Don't want to negate that. But this model of social integration is a very, very inclusive model. This is Lisa Berkman, who's a sociologist who made one of the original findings regarding mortality. That meta-analysis includes her original finding. And she has this very complex set of boxes. I'm not going to try to go through them. I just want you to know, very complex set of boxes when you try to look at social integration. Okay, what is social integration? This is engagement with a mix of friends, a spouse, a child. Okay, so we've got some close people there, a sibling, I didn't put on there, grandchildren, but then it's also your neighbors, group activities, engagement, both formal and informal. Maybe you go to church, temple, mosque, any of that kind of engagement. Now, this is not just that you are emotionally connected, but that you live longer in better health and better cognitive functioning. This is where we're seeing a lot of the action, or at least we're seeing enough of the action that's not as well researched as it should be. The other way that scholars have thought about this, Kate Fiore, Howard Litwin, is they've looked at network types. As gerontologists and as psychologists, we tend to like to think of the social network. And so they've looked and said, well, who's in that network? And they've classified them. The diverse one would be that socially integrated one, and then the restricted one would be the least, the socially isolated. And then you have some other configurations here. And what they did is very similar. It's a study of looking at mortality, that flip side of survival. And that restricted network is at much greater risk over time. And you get your diverse network at very low risk. Your friend network has almost the same as the diverse, except not the groups, as much with the groups. Okay, so let's talk about this. Why is that? Why is it going to look even better than family, even better than these close ties if you've got the mixed? And one of these questions is, how do different types of ties function in daily life for older adults? And I'm going to be getting at two parts to this, the different types of ties and the daily life. And your department has people who are looking at daily life. Gloria is one of the top people doing that. I'm going to show you some research we've done. Gloria was a collaborator on it, on daily life. And that is that people live, if you're interacting with other people, you're doing it throughout the day. Those close ties, we have a paper that just got in press looking at when you have close ties you don't have contact with, because that attachment idea and so on can be in your mind. You can feel attached. But when we talk about social integration, we're talking about actual daily experiences. So when we look at, I want to talk about weak ties, because those are, again, okay, we know those close ties. Social integration is both. What do weak ties do for you? And this was the first coining of the term, the strength of weak ties. Mark Granovetter was so, I'm telling you, I would cite this paper just based on the title, right? It's just a great title. And what he did is he was more sociological, and he started out looking to say, how do people find jobs? And he started out with the obvious answer. We all know nepotism is the best way to get a good job. And we know that from some of the other stuff, get born into a wealthy family, keep the wealth, get the job. And that's not what he found. What he found is that for most people, it's the weak ties, because all of your close ties know the exact same people you know. So if there's a job available, but you need to have a bunch of people who know a bunch of people who know a bunch of people who aren't your closest people to get that job. This is written in the 70s. This is before we had LinkedIn. But, even LinkedIn, I'm always like saying yes to people if they're in academics or gerontology, because I'm like, yeah, they need another weak tie. Maybe they get a job through someone I know. I have a book on consequential strangers. It's a little bit broader concept. I won't talk about it as much today, but I will tell you it's translated into Chinese and Korean. I can't promise you it's translated correctly because, I don't know, but anyways. And so it's a little broader concept than weak ties. I am going to talk just for a minute so you know who I'm talking about. I'm talking about your coworker, your neighbor, a service provider, a mentor or a mentee, a community group, the people you encounter in a religious gathering, maybe you're volunteering and those co-volunteers, the people you run into at the gym. I personally know the checkout people at my local grocery store. I just enjoy finding out about their grandchildren. Your distant relatives, maybe your social media contacts. Now, I'm not going to talk about this as much because it's not as widely used by older adults. And when it is used, it tends to be used with people they already know and are connected to. So I'm not going to talk about that as much. What do? Well, I already mentioned this attachment. There's a belongingness. There's social support, which is a huge thing. I don't want to in any way mind what we know about close ties. These are incredibly important. If you had to choose between the two, choose this. But if you can do both, it's way better. So these weak ties provide social capital, which is a sociology term for what Mark Granovetter looked at. They also provide stimulation and novelty. So during the shutdowns of COVID-19, if you were fortunate enough to have people to shut down with, you had these close ties. But at the end of the day or at the end of the week, you had nothing to say to each other. You'd all been just like sitting there together going, yeah. So you needed to have those little Zoom talks with someone who wasn't in your own house. They also provide that familiarity in outside settings, and they often provide a connection to your personal past or a pattern to daily life. They ground you. They keep your life continuous. That's also true for your close ties, but it's different because we're talking about daily life. And chances are that you don't always go to the supermarket or the gym with somebody you're partnered with in a close relationship. I do want to tell you about my first study that revealed the close ties, and it was a study of holiday cards. And it was done in the 90s. And so for those of you who are grad students, we used to send individualized cards to people. I mean, we wrote them, and we would write these cards, and then we would seal them in an envelope, lick it, try to avoid getting a little paper cut, put a stamp on, and then we would go to these, there were blue boxes on every, and you had to walk uphill through the snow both ways to do it. So this is what we did. And we got these, we had them fill out a survey for each of those cards. If they were willing, we had them provide a copy of the card so we could code it. We had an overall survey looking at how important, rituals were to them. And then we also had a measure of belongingness, which in many ways is the opposite of loneliness. So we were looking at this in these cards by age. And what we found is that getting cards and getting a greater number of cards was better at that time of year, including from weak ties. They predicted, it was social embeddedness, sort of that opposite of loneliness. I feel like I'm a part of the world. And so getting these things and getting them from people you've known a long time. So for example, one of the people wrote a spontaneous comment to me and said, when my husband passed away, his former college roommate kept sending a card. And after 3 years, I finally sent him a memo and said, Sam passed away in 1990. But it's interesting because even the act of sending is also important. So even though that person had passed away, obviously this is not a relationship the way we think of it. There was no back and forth. It was a representation that you had connections to people who were not ongoing and close. And that made me also begin some interest in what the heck are these people doing? So to get at some of this issue, we conducted the Daily Experiences and Wellbeing Study on adults over the age of 65 in Austin, Texas. And we did an initial 2-hour baseline interview. I'll show you some of the things we captured there, but they're basically things about the person, including I'll show you some things about their beliefs about their social ties and their overall social engagement. We then did an intensive data collection for 5 to 6 days, and this included that they answered little surveys every 3 hours. They wore an Actical, which was a very scientific, like really precise version of your Fitbit. Fitbits have gotten much better, but at the time we did it, you could still do some of this and maybe get a few points. And then we also used something called the electronically activated recorder so that we were capturing sound in the environment. We did these multiple devices, multiple assessments to try to get at what is going on in the day, what is going on subjectively, what is going on objectively. The sample was over 65. They all had to be at least partially retired, couldn't work more than 20 hours a week. It's a very highly educated sample, but I do want to tell you the Austrian metropolitan area is a very highly educated area. So we're pretty representative here. A third of it was either Hispanic or African-American, including Spanish speaking. We have all the materials and interviewers available in Spanish. Okay, so in this baseline measure, we took 2 assessments of social involvement. One of them is one that's been widely used. Again, I've probably got 50,000 citations. I didn't check, but it's been widely used. And it's an assessment of the people who are close and important in your life. We did this assessment. The interview was in person, so we could do this. You map out the closest people in your life, and we got a whole bunch of information about them. We know their gender, their age, how far away they live, how much you feel loved, how much you feel conflict, all that good stuff. What do they do for you in general? All that good stuff. Then we used a standard measure of social integration. And this asks, it's interesting how social integration is conceptualized. It's conceptualized more as a role. So have you had contact with grown children in the past 2 weeks? And that means that we are accounting for the fact, we're not fully accounting for the fact that you have multiple kids, but you don't have to have had contact with multiple kids. You have to have had one. And the same thing with each of these. So it tells us about the diversity of the social ties with which you engage. We did a whole bunch of other stuff in the baseline interview. I just want to let you know that we've got a jillion different outcomes in there that get at a whole bunch of different dimensions of well-being that might be of interest to you. Let's talk about these weak ties. What the heck is going on with them? It's linked to social integration. I want to make that clear. I'm talking about both, but I'm focusing a little more on this because there's not as much known about it. Okay, what we did is we took those first 10 partners from the convoy and we transferred it onto our device for the EMA so that during the day we can ask if you've had contact with these close partners and then link it to all the information we have on them. We then asked for up to 6 additional partners, the weak ties, and we did ask some follow-up questions. Remember, you're trying to keep it brief or people aren't going to do it. But we asked how they're related, how long have you known them, you know, et cetera. We looked at the mode of contact, phone, in-person, text, and then we looked at groups or alone, so we could get some of that too that was going on. So we really were trying to capture what was going on socially every 3 hours. We looked at their behaviors. They rated 14 different activities, and we looked at their mood, amongst other things. We also looked at the quality of the interactions. You know, was it positive? Was it tense? And so on. Okay. We have that Actical I mentioned. We can get physical activity and sedentary assessments. We can get sleep, and we're working on some assessments of sleep right now. That electronically activated recorder on the handheld device, every 7 minutes, it captures 30 seconds of sound. I'm going to talk a little bit about conversations and television exposure, but we're capturing everything. Now, there must be now 150, 200 studies that have used it in different contexts with no adverse effects. There are a number of safeguards that let them delete anything private and tell us if there's something private going on so that we're not capturing that. But we're capturing about 4,000 to 5,000 snippets per person over those 5 days, something like that. Maybe less than that. I'm sorry. It's in the 100. Maybe it's 400 to 500. Sorry, but it's still enough that you can look at within individual, even if you lose some. And when you're walking around, just pay attention. And as you pass people, you're going to realize that that's enough to know the context. It's not enough to know exactly. You're not going to be able to call up their aunt and say, you're not going to believe what they said about you. But you are going to be able to go, oh, they must be talking about a distant relative. You can capture it, and they're really pissed off. Just as you're walking around, you're going to see that this is actually a very good measure. And like I said, there are hundreds of studies, lots that you can take out of it. Okay, so who are they with? every 3 hours out of the 4,000 assessments that we had completed. They're with close only about 38% of the time. They're with weak only almost a fifth of the time. They're with close and weak as much as they're with close, just, about. It's adding those weak in. It's primarily because our married people are hanging out with their spouse. And then they're alone about 13, 14% of the time. Now, I'm going to be talking primarily about the contribution of close versus weak ties being present when we did analyses. We are working on other analyses right now, but that's actually a conservative estimate, right? Because basically, this is a wash when I run the analyses because they're both there. So I'm not getting the independent effects. So in some ways, this is a more conservative way to look at it. I'm saying if this is present and that is present, what is going on in terms of some of my outcomes? Okay, my first one is I'm looking at, okay, you're encountering a whole bunch of diverse people. Do you have more diverse behaviors? Are you higher in physical activity? Are you less sedentary? And the reason I'm looking at that is that puzzle I showed you of, look, if you were saying, hey, I'm usually with diverse people, I live longer. Well, that's because you're getting social support. And that's because you're getting feeling loved and it's calming down your stress. And that's because these close people are taking you to the doctor. But maybe it's also because you have to get out of your chair to interact with all these people. And sedentary is a lot of time that people spend. So just getting people out of sedentary, and it's a little more than that, you don't just get out of your chair, but you get the idea. And with this ActiCal, it's measurable. So it's an extra component. It's not the only component, but it was a missing component in our models that we've looked at without daily experience. I want to show you what happened when we put this into daily. This is an average participant. And what we see here is that we do have the increased social integration with less sedentary and with generally mean activity is higher. What's interesting here, though, is that this isn't a causal result. It would be very hard to say this caused this. We've got a temporal component to it. I mean, it makes sense. This is your most active time of day. It's got a component where these co-occur. And so in some of it too, take a look at this activity peak, right? You've been out for a while, you're in your 70s or 80s, you've had this incredibly active moment. The ability to sustain that may decrease. Look at where you can finally get going again, right? So these things are very hard to talk about from a causal perspective. And that is the way we like to think of things. We like our little boxes. I call it choo-choo trains. We like that, or we like our fancy SEM, like, but it may not be the case. And it doesn't mean you can't intervene, but it does mean you need to think of this much more holistically and saying, okay, how do we get into these moments with all of this going on? Okay. In general, we did find that people are using more diverse behaviors. They're just different behaviors. And we did find physical activity was higher with the weak ties. So again, because you can sit, I'm going to show you, you can sit at home with your close ties. Mood, the close ties predicted more positive mood. They did not predict less negative mood, which probably makes sense when you think about who annoys you. And we have other papers on that, you know, you love them, but boy, do they push your buttons. Your weak ties are really not associated with mood. And that's probably the diversity of weak ties that you engage with, the amount of investment, you know. Okay. And remember that these people are at least partially retired. So work is a major source of stressful weak ties, and they're just not there. We're looking at late life. Okay, I already said these few things. I'm just putting it in again. Okay, I now want to talk a little bit about our sound files. This is a map of the acoustic map of sound waves. Again, average participant from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. I do want to add that the College of Natural Sciences at UT has a visualizing data contest. And we won it against the chemists and those like those astronomers with their fancy microscopes and all of them. Sound waves in old people. All right. So anyways, this image, what it shows is the brown is TV watching. The flat is no sound. And the rainbow is when we have lots of conversation and engagement. So it's kind of interesting. I'll show you more about that. I want to talk for a minute about the idea of cognitive stimulation. So this goes back to the 1960s when we had rats. Okay, so they had these rats in these stimulating environments, which actually was 10 or more littermates, as well as little toys. So you had to have a whole bunch of other little rats with you. And they could do mazes better. And then when they sacrificed them, their brains had better structures and so on. Since then, through the 80s, 90s, this century, there's a lot of longitudinal data showing that social work predicts cognition, and that's on a global level. And it's well controlled, they're looking at baseline. The activities, I did want to mention that one of your colleagues does research looking at activities and cognition, and she might be cringing because her work is much more sophisticated than mine. So, what can I say? I should have mentioned too that Aga Brzezinska does work looking at physical activity and cognitive stimulation as well. So you do have a department that does what I'm doing in a more sophisticated way, and I hope they'll forgive me for doing my best. We have a chapter for the Handbook of Cognitive Aging that shows that all of this matters within a range of normal cognition. Once you hit into the dementias, I don't think you can socially integrate your way out. It's, brain degeneration has already started. So we're really talking about this in a period where you would most want to be able to intervene and prevent. Let's talk for a minute about conversation, because it turns out that language deterioration is one of the earliest and actually strongest indicators in Alzheimer's, at least. So when you think about that, and you'll hear about people saying, yeah, long before that happened with my mom, she would say things that really were simplified and not like what she used to be like. So we had these 158,000 sound files, and we double transcribed them. Gloria was very involved in this. What we did is every single file was transcribed once and then transcribed again to make sure that it was accurate. Now, at that time, the software just wasn't good enough. I'm not sure it is right now, because the level at which we want to analyze language is pretty intense. And I'll show you again that you want it to be precise. The coders also rated ambient noise, what's going on in the background. Are other people speaking? In most states at that time, the idea that we did not transcribe other people. They were alerted that there was someone there. The person wore the device on the outside with a little label so that we had little belts and things. But we didn't transcribe, so it's only ambient noise. And we used the linguistic inquiry and word count software. The transcription, I was going to digress. The first summer we started transcribing, and we did the math to figure out how long it was going to take. I do want to tell you, if you do this kind of research, you have to do a lot more planning in advance than you do usually. You have to be looking at storage space. You have to do calculations. So, for example, the last transfer we did of sound files, we had them at University of Michigan. It took 18 hours. And, we were using 2 university systems, and we had a hard drive, absolutely the right size, dedicated. And with the transcriptions, we realized it would take us 3.5 years to do that many sound files. So we started, all of our collaborators all over the country started getting undergraduates. We held meetings. We think it was pretty interesting for them to hear all these things that the daily life capture of older adult conversation. So we felt okay about asking that. And anyways, so that was the process that we used. We've only right now done the number of words in these 3 different categories. You do speak more words when you're with your week-only ties. It makes some sense. If you think about it, you can just sit in silence much more comfortably. Maybe you're both reading. The combination is the most conversation, being brought in by both sets, and being alone is the least. I am again going to talk about the contribution of these 2 groups separately, even though this is the overlap. Okay, this is the loop categories, just so you know. These are the ones I'm going to be talking about primarily. They, as you can see, they're more complex language than, run, spot, run. They're not just your nouns and verbs. They're additional words that you use to make your point more subtle, more nuanced, and more complex. You could make a point with nouns and verbs. What we find is that when they're with the weak ties, surprisingly, they're doing this less. And that was so counter expected. We have not yet fully explored or explained it, and we need to work on that. But it is counterintuitive to what we had predicted. We thought that the Weak ties would provide that novel stimulation. So they're using more complex language. You can use coded language with your close ties. This was our prediction. You know, for example, I can say to my husband, oh, you remember in California that time? And you're like, oh my God. Whereas for you, I'd have to say, oh my gosh, we were driving in California. We were expecting it to go really well, but that's not what happened. Turned out the road was closed. Do you see what I mean? I have to conditionally, and it was really treacherous and we drove carefully. I have to use adverbs and adjectives and whatever, and that's not what's happening. So we're still in the process of analyzing this. And I will tell you, we're trying to do some things with machine learning. We've done a little bit of that, and I hope to get to that later, perhaps in my talk. Do you mind? I should check the chat, or do you want to check it and I'll keep. Okay, let me know if they have any questions.
Okay.
Yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
What is the metric for the y-axis?
Oh, this is the proportion of the, so if we take the snippets all together of the snippets in which you spoke, that's the proportion of the words that you spoke that fit each of those categories. It's a little more, actually, no, it's more complicated than that. I'm speaking incorrectly. It's a multi-level model, and it's the predictive coefficient of the weak tie and the close tie in that model. It's similar, but it's if there's a close tie, what is the predictive capacity of a close tie in predicting the use of this relative to the number of snippets that we had with the close tie. So it's a little more complicated. I had this whole long conversation yesterday.
Some kind of regression coefficient.
In some ways, yes, it is. It is. And I have to say, I have a grad student who's working on this, and we spent like so much time. She just graduated. Her explaining this to me. And again, snippets of sound. My husband came through afterwards and he said, I didn't hear precisely what Crystal was saying to you, but it's remarkable how much more confident she's gotten over the years. And he could capture that just walking in and out in 30-second snippets, that she at some point said, no, I really want you to understand this. And that little snippet tells you that I am really ignorant of the models you've had, right? You don't need a lot more than that to know. But yes, she spent a lot of time, and she said, basically, you can say it's proportional if you need to. Oh, that's what I'm saying. In any case, it's relative. And I think that this is an area where we really need to work because it's counterintuitive. Okay, I want to talk for a minute about television viewing because we could capture that as well. And we had almost perfect coding. We have like above 99% agreement on this. You can really tell when the TV's on. Even compared to the radio, believe it or not, you can really tell. What happens there is that when you're with your close ties, you engage in more television watching. Mm-hmm. And when you're with your weak ties, less so. And that's accounted for in part because whether you're in the home or not. But on average, everybody watches 6.4 hours. There's no big difference on that. 37% of waking time, the TV is on. You are more sedentary when the TV is on, particularly if you're watching with others. I'm gonna go into that one in detail in a minute. Is TV watching the same for people who live alone? My research team will tell you living alone is like my new favorite variable, in part maybe because of COVID. But I've been really curious how daily life, right? Do you have primarily a spouse there or not? And that seems like it would be a big deal socially. And so what happens there is people who live alone do not watch more television, or at least they do not have the TV on. That's what I should be saying, than those who live with others. They were more lonely when they watch TV. Now, again, this is a 3-hour interval. Did they become more lonely, or did they have that TV on because they were lonely? They are not as sedentary when the TV is on as older adults who live with others. And this leads me to think that they're doing other things. They have the TV on so that there's a voice present, but they're vacuuming or they're, doing other things that aren't sedentary. They're doing the dishes. Whereas when you're with other people, when you live with other people, you're sitting down and you're watching television together. And maybe that's an important part of your relationship, and you're, joking and enjoying it and gives you fodder for conversation, but you aren't moving around. Okay, so let's build a little bit more on how that. I just showed you that it really matters, the context. that it's not enough to just look at daily life. So I'm going to show you there's individual characteristics and attributes. My former student, Manhua, has an entire line of research on empathy, both the benefits and the costs of empathy, that when you are constantly through daily life relating to other people's emotions, that can have a cost. So she's done some great work. I have a student who's done some things with belongingness and how that differentiates you. Do you get more belongingness out of close or weak ties, depending on how you are, and narcissism that I'll show you in a minute, because it's kind of cool. The marital status and the living situation, I'll come back to, and the mode of contact, I'll look at a little bit. Because again, I'm really intrigued right now by mode of contact because we've had some counterintuitive findings. Okay, narcissism. This is the work of my current doctoral student, Xiang Zhang. Narcissism is this grandiosity and entitlement. It's a motivation for self-promotion. Typically, the social encounters will be worse, and the person may be more reactive to those negative social events, which Gloria's looked at that, not necessarily in the context of narcissism. We predicted they would benefit more from weak tie encounters because your family and friends have habituated to you. You can't impress them. They've heard the story before. They know you didn't really save the baby from the building, on fire. But the weak ties, you can, impress them and keep it novel. And frankly, you can't really use them up because there's 7 billion people on the planet and we've only got 10 of them that are close. So you've got this infinite resource of, doing that. Well, what we did is we looked at positive mood, and that's just the metric for it, the average. And people who discuss something stressful with the close partner, what you see is the ones who are lower in narcissism, the ones who are lower in narcissism. If they discuss something with a close partner, that's stressful, it really lowers their positive mood. They're engaged and they're saying, look, this is really bad and I care about you. And frankly, the people who are high in narcissism don't really care. They're just positive regardless of your stressful day, honey. So we're seeing a difference there. When we look at the less close partners, the people who are high in narcissism have a reaction, their negative mood is worse when they've discussed something stressful with a weak tie. And the people who are lower in narcissism have it, but not to the same extent. Those are different. The differences are different. Okay. High narcissism is not really linked to positive and negative mood. The narcissism does get us to poor social quality ties. More narcissistic older adults were more sensitive to tense encounters with weak ties, but less narcissistic older adults were more sensitive to stressful encounters with close ties. So this individual participant level variable changes the effects of what goes on in the daily social world. And it changes the effects for potentially longer term well-being. Again, I'm just going to speak to Gloria's work, which gets at these things a little bit more. I told you I really like this variable living alone because we've been finding things with it and it's really interesting. We did a little survey right during May and June of the shutdown. And so we asked them, we used a retrospective method because we couldn't get devices to them and said, basically the same things that we've been doing every 3 hours. We had them remember it the day before, and there's a pretty good, the day reconstruction method has got a fair number of studies looking at validity. I'm going to just show you the afternoon time when people are typically the most active and there's the most going on. Our participants are the same ones from daily experiences, by the way. I'm not going to present longitudinal data, but these are our same people. They're now 69 and over. Okay, what happened here is if you live with others, there's no effect of in-person contact. There are times when you're not with someone and there's no effect on positive mood. But if you live alone, having any in-person contact during that time boosted your positive mood quite a bit. Now, what's interesting is if you have phone contact, you're more lonely. This is mostly accounted for by loneliness. So that's interesting. We don't know if they phoned them because they were lonely or if phone contact made them more lonely, but we can at least say the phone did not mitigate high loneliness if it was there. The phone is a period where that loneliness remains. in that period of time. And this is an inconvenient truth. And it didn't help. Electronic contact doesn't help either. And the inconvenient truth is that we want to use remote interventions. And this is showing up in the literature, that we cannot get the effect. And sometimes we get the opposite effect of what we're aiming for. So what can I say? I wish it were otherwise. There are other studies showing this as well, and showing it during COVID. Okay, who did they have the in-person contact with? Well, if you lived with others, it was your spouse. They were there all the time. If you had grown children come home, they were there all the time. If you lived alone, you were more likely to have that with a friend, a neighbor, a service provider, or others. And I've got to say, a whole other study here is getting to know your neighbors better during COVID. We didn't know them at all. And it's our whole street is like people in their 70s and 80s. And we get together in our front yards and we still see them all the time. And so there was in-person contact, and most of them lived alone. So anyways, this is kind of interesting. The phone contact often was with a friend as well if you live alone. So that's not different. It's not that, oh, well, you were having the in-person with a friend and you were on the phone with a grown child, and that makes why you were lonely. It doesn't seem to be the variables that account for it. My take-home message here is that weak ties can get you out of the world. And I mean that in many different ways. Typically, you do leave the home. So I mean that literally, but I also mean it psychologically, getting you, into new ways of thinking. Close ties help you feel better at home. And we all get by with a little help from our friends and consequential strangers, but it's not just help. It's that contact and the diversity of the network. I do want to let you know that our data are publicly available. You can even just Google daily experiences and well-being, NACDA. It's the National Archive of Computerized Digital Access to the data sets. And I gave you the whole URL, but the National Institutes of Health asks us to release our data publicly. And I will tell you, I don't know for sure if it's the only data set like this, but it's one of very few, because it took us 6 months to de-identify the data. And that's a whole process in and of itself, because you have to change enough of the identifiable variables, and then you rerun your model to make sure that you would get findings. So for example, you can recode age into 3-year intervals. There are just a lot of things like that you try to do so that if someone were savvy enough, they can't go in and hunt down their, I'm the neighbor of so-and-so, I heard they were in the study and I'm a statistician. We've done a lot within our ability to de-identify it. But anyways, use it. Look at all that effort. We went through that effort to collect it. Then I had to think about de-identifying it. I like to go and track my metrics and go, oh, good, someone downloaded it. At least go and download it, increase my metric, make my day. I need to thank my collaborators. I need to thank the National Institute on Aging for the funding they gave me, the Center on Aging and Population Sciences, which, yes, I co-direct, but the director makes the decisions about the support on my project and vice versa. I want to thank the Center on Healthy Aging and the department. I owe a huge thanks to Gloria, to Manfred, to Aga, and thank you. And I guess I should let you ask some questions. So, yeah.
Just real quickly, those participating in the study, were they all sort of independently living?
Sorry, yes, that was a requirement.
Okay.
So that we were looking at people sort of at a very long stage of life, hopefully for most people, and again, like that thing about trying for prevention, what can we do? Yeah, great question.
Hi, Karen. Thank you for this talk. It was really nice to listen.
Yeah, it's nice to see you in 3 dimensions.
In person. It's about either inclusion, exclusion criteria, or anything you collected around chronic conditions.
Yeah.
And how that might have impacted their physical activity or even just connecting socially the week, particularly the week.
Yeah. And so given the criteria that basically you were not in a caregiving situation, so you need to be able to live, but we do have functional impairment. We do have a range on that because people living alone can't get upstairs, or they have all kinds of things that they're losing vision. There's a lot of things that happen that people are still in their home environment and doing, their daily life. I actually have a grad student looking at what the older adults give to other people as they're accumulating various deficits, and looking also at life crises. You were just widowed. you've had some financial issues, or your kid had financial issues and you're siphoning off. So there's a lot of things that are going on there. And the functional one, oh my God, I have a paper and I'm the first author on the functional limitations and the daily, but I was so busy talking to Crystal to try to understand the graph yesterday that I can send it to you though, but we did look at it. It's really cool data. It's kind of like the living alone. It's that individual level variability. Do weak ties help you even more?
And I am thinking about not just one chronic condition, but multiple.
Yes, exactly.
Knowing that as we age.
Yeah. And
So yeah, I'd love to take a look at that.
yeah, functional impairments. Now in this sample, you do have a few people with the 6, 7 kinds of things, but not that many.
Okay.
So you can we had to sort of group them into, there's a lot with none, and then there's a bunch with 1, and then there's a bunch with more than 1. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, completely. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was pretty interested in the COVID follow-up survey that you
Yeah.
did with the people who were living alone, and having a phone call actually made them more lonely compared to days where they didn't make a phone call to a friend. If I'm
Yeah, throughout the day, periods of time throughout the day.
Do you think that was something that was specific to COVID, or do you think that's something that would still hold true? Like, so you call a friend, but you actually can't meet with
Yes,
them.
exactly. That was our first interpretation, right? Is that need for in-person is so high and you can't mitigate, but there is literature showing this now. And we really want to go forward with it because we all want this to work. And in fact, I just did this interview with somebody who's doing this for, I don't know, the Population Bureau. Anyways, but they sent me they wanted to confirm my work in the quotes. And in it, to begin with, were national studies that showed the same thing. And so, yeah, and they're starting to write about it, that we cannot get the same effect, which is sad because we all want to pick up the phone and, well, I don't know if we all, but we all should pick up the phone and call our mothers and, our poor mothers. Anyways, so being a mother, I still like the phone calls, believe me, but it doesn't get me maybe as mitigated. You had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering if you looked at if the participants had like animals in the home, like pets.
That is so great because I am doing my pet project right now. And what's really interesting is we're trying to code it from the sound waves. And what's interesting about it is we know there's pet speech and so on. We haven't gotten very far because we keep getting distracted by other data collections or whatever, but I really want to get to it this fall. And one of the reasons we got to it, I told you we had transcribers all over the country, and we would meet and we would just say, what are you learning from it? Because that's a really interesting experience to hear it. And there's one person who came and said, okay, I'm listening to this guy and he says, Jimmy, I really want to watch the Mets tonight because, I watched the Cubs with you last night. And he goes on, there's all of these things where he's talking to Jimmy. And it's on day 2 that Jimmy barks and he says, good boy, Jimmy, good boy. And so he lives alone, my favorite variable, and he's not engaging with what we call pet speak. So you bring people into the lab, and pet speak's not identical to infant speak. It's got a lot of the same characteristics. There's some slight differences. And there certainly are people who use pet speak when they talk to their pets, but we're really interested. Do they use, are we going to find more people who are talking to Jimmy as though Jimmy were their buddy until, so anyways, absolutely. We're so interested in that right now. And it's my pet project, but I'm not making progress because when you write the grant for NIH and you tell them all the cool things you're going to do, it's not, we're going to see if someone pets their dog. It's, I don't have that as an outcome, but I wish I did. So yeah, you nailed something I'm interested in. Other questions or, yeah.
Curious from a privacy standpoint and recording all those sound bits. So people could say, I don't want you to use this past. But did you uncover any interpersonal violence or anything like
No,
that?
we did not, but I'll tell you, here are the safeguards on it. First of all, there's a privacy setting that you train everyone on. Second of all, every 3 hours in that 3-hour EMA, the first thing we ask is, did anything private happen in the last 3 hours? If so, we get rid of it. Okay. At the end of the study, the person comes back to get the devices. They pull together the sound files that's onto the computer. And they say, I'd like to ask you to review any days that were, stressful or that had anything in it. If you can tell me the approximate time of day, I'll cue it, and then you can decide whether to delete it. People don't do that, to be honest. And they do, I don't know what they're doing otherwise, right? Because we're deleting it. So I don't know. We have not detected that. It's a really good question. I tell you, I'm on a grant right now on suicidality in language, and they've taken adolescents who've been released from the hospital. And I mean, I'm on it, but I haven't gone through with them, they're clinicians and so on. We're not listening in real time, right? We're transcribing 6 months later. And so, but the other thing, in fairness, we're decontextualized. So in theory, you can't capture enough of that to be able to confidently report it. I will tell you that in the middle of the study, we had someone die, not because of anything involving us. They had had cancer and they passed away. And that was, I'm kind of amazed that's never happened out of the thousands of people when we're studying them. And the family was so sweet. They returned the devices. I'm like, oh my God, that's the last thing you should have been worried about. But they're like, our relative was really glad to be in this study. And anyway, so that was nice. We've had one case of elder abuse. We just got out of the field with these people again. We just did a phone thing where we gave them OCA to, we were primarily checking to see if we can go back in the field with them and how are they doing cognitively. That's the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It's the one that Donald Trump was bragging he did well on, but it's not. It's a dementia screener. We do in fact hope that everybody's above the threshold on that, but who's in office. But anyways, that was what we gave them. And we did have a woman. I mean, this is, hello, can I give you a little cognitive test? Can I just ask, a little depression, not even the depression scale. I mean, it was really that. And she said, I'm glad you called. My niece has been living with me and I wanted her to leave and she's stealing my money and I need your help. And we had never had that before. And so it set off a lot of protocols for us like that. It turns out that if they're not in imminent danger, well, you probably all who are working in these areas know they don't jump in to investigate right away. And so it was kind of heart-wrenching. We contacted IRB, it was kind of, anyways, that's again something we really put a lot of thought into because she was being abused and entrapped. And so I guess she knew that the woman was doing this study or so, because we were paying her for it, right? So she knew that. So the interviewer just called back and said, oh, I just want to let you know your payment's coming and I've taken care of all the things we've discussed and, appreciate, so that we didn't, because she was listening to the phone and things. But anyways, I mean, as much as we could take care of it, we notified authorities. And we couldn't call back to find out because, yeah.
I have a question. So I think it's so interesting how narcissism was a moderator. And I'm curious if something more like extroversion or introversion might make a difference too, because, and I'm thinking more of the weak ties. Not
Yes,
the
yes,
ties.
yes.
I don't know if you've looked at that.
Well, she did rerun it with extroversion. And you get, the findings are not as strong, but there's definitely also, I can't remember the correlation, but extroversion and narcissism are not completely orthogonal.
Yeah.
It's not that extroverts tend to be narcissists, but it's that narcissists tend to be more extroverted. It's hard to be an introverted narcissist. So there is a little bit of that, but because you can have low narcissistic extroverts, the finding's not quite as strong. Though they like to be out in the social world. It's just that they also like to be with their friends. If you're an extrovert, you like to be with your grown kids because it's just fun and, but it's a great question. And reviewers definitely make us rerun everything. There's one that we have that was, I forget what, but it was like depressive something. And we reran it all with neuroticism. Yeah.
So kind of, piggybacking off of this, I've been kind of perseverating about the language we use when we're with close and weak ties.
Yeah.
And so I like the data that you showed, the close ties and the weak ties and the differences in how we speak when we're with those ties, and then the narcissism stuff. And what I was thinking about was maybe for these highly narcissistic people, when somebody who's a weaker tie to you is like telling you all their problems, that's kind of a weird conversation, right? Like, you
Yeah.
know, the grocery store and the clerk is telling you all about their problems. Like, a lot of us would probably be like, okay, yeah, that's, you know, that's nice. Sorry, that's going on with you. And maybe highly narcissistic people either lack the social skills in terms of what to do, or like that just like throws them off. I wasn't sure how you were.
You know, it's a
interpreting
good point, because I also think it means that they're not doing all the talking.
Mhm.
They're not getting the self-presentation. That alone might be part of it.
So they're not like fully in control of that situation,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah, and some of it too, when I'm thinking about who is it, like, so maybe as a graduate student or as a mentor, you're not listing the other, you know, as important as you are in each other's professional life, it might not come to mind as, you know, who's so important you can't live without them. And maybe someone like that, disclosing kind of puts an onus on you that you just don't want to deal with.
Mhm.
So, you know, so I think it's a combination of things. I should also add, one of the things that we talked about, this is very, very preliminary findings. I mean, I was just like, oh, let's show something new. Can you run this real quick for me? And we didn't have time to interpret it or anything else. And the key thing that I want to know is, how do we characterize the conversation with weak ties? If the proportions are that with the close ties, you know, the proportion of complex, like, you know, the cognitive processes and this, you could add those proportions together and you should get over 100% because they are doing all of them. Are we there with the weak ties? How do we characterize it? What the heck is going on with their language? And I don't know the answer to that, because I just discovered that we didn't know it. So coming attractions, we're going to find it out. And my grad student was like, yeah, I'm not doing this with the separate variables because I want to know what they're doing when they're with both. So there's going to be much better data in the future. I will add, I also work with a computational linguist who is helping us do some machine learning on the different speech, not there, but I would say that's the other thing. It's a very, very interdisciplinary program. You cannot do this work with all these different types of assessments without a lot of people who know more than I do. Well, thanks, you guys. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your engagement, your good questions, your thoughts and energy, and